October 18th, 2023. Inside a tense, silent federal courtroom in Birmingham, Alabama, a mother sits just feet away from a monster. For 18 years, for months, and 18 days, Beth Holloway had looked into the eyes of the man she knew destroyed her daughter, only to be met with lies, smirks, and cruel extortion. But today, the games are over. The killer, Joran Sloot, steps up to the microphone. Under a strict, high-stakes plea deal, he is forced to reveal exactly what he did on that dark Aruban beach in 2005. He breathes into the mic, ready to confess to the ultimate horror. The weapon he used, how he ended her life, and where he hid the body. The courtroom holds its breath.
Welcome to Truth Finder Afees. In today's case, we are diving deep into the dark, labyrinthine timeline, the shocking international betrayals, and the long-awaited resolution of our case of the day, the disappearance, murder, and ultimate extortion of Natalee Holloway. This is a story of a mother's unyielding grit, an island paradise harboring dark secrets, and a ruthless predator who thought he could outrun international justice forever. Before we uncover the final, chilling words spoken in that courtroom, do not forget to subscribe to our channel right now, turn on your notifications so you never miss an investigation, and tell us in the comments section below where you are watching from. Now, let us get into the beginning of this nightmare.
To understand how a family was shattered for nearly 2 decades, we have to travel back to May of 2005. Natalee Holloway was an 18-year-old honors graduate from Mountain Brook High School, an affluent suburb of Birmingham, Alabama. Blessed with a bright smile, intelligence, and an ambitious spirit, she had earned a full academic scholarship to the University of Alabama, where she planned to study pre-med. Before embarking on the grueling journey of medical school, Natalee joined 124 of her fellow classmates for an unofficial graduation trip to the scenic Caribbean island of Aruba. It was supposed to be a safe, celebratory rite of passage, chaperoned by 7 adults who kept a loose eye on the teenagers as they enjoyed the sun, sand, and nightlife of Palm Beach. The students checked into the Holiday Inn Sunspree Resort, a beautiful oceanfront property. For the first few days, the trip was a dream filled with beach excursions and tropical parties. But as the vacation drew to a close on Sunday night, May 29th, the atmosphere shifted. The students headed out for one final celebration at Carlos and Charlie's, a popular, high-energy tourist bar located in downtown Oranjestad. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and the venue was packed with locals and travelers alike. It was here, amidst the flashing lights and crowded dance floor, that Natalee crossed paths with 17-year-old Joran Sloot. Joran was a Dutch national living on the island, an academic honor student and a talented tennis player whose father, Paulus Sloot, was a prominent attorney training to become a judge in the Aruban legal system. To Natalee, Joran seemed charming, wealthy, and deeply embedded in the local culture. As the night wore on into the early morning hours of Monday, May 30th, the bar began to empty out. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, Natalee was seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's. She walked out to a gray Honda Civic, climbing into the vehicle with Joran and his 2 local acquaintances, 21-year-old Deepak Kalpoe and 18-year-old Satish Kalpoe. Classmates watched the car pull away into the Aruban night, assuming Natalee was simply getting a ride back to the Holiday Inn or going to see a different part of the island.
But morning came, and everything fell apart. By 11 o'clock in the morning on May 30th, the Mountain Brook graduates assembled in the lobby of the Holiday Inn to board buses for the Queen Beatrix International Airport. Natalee was nowhere to be found. When her chaperones checked her hotel room, they discovered her luggage was completely packed. Her passport was sitting on the counter, and her bed had not been slept in. Her flight departed for Alabama without her. Panic instantly rippled across the ocean to Birmingham, sparking a frantic scramble that would change the landscape of international missing persons investigations forever. Receiving the terrifying news, Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway Twitty, alongside her husband Jug Twitty, refused to wait for official diplomatic channels. Within hours, they chartered a private jet and arrived in Aruba by the next morning, May 31st. Armed with a picture of her daughter and fueled by maternal instinct, Beth bypassed standard procedures. She went straight to the Holiday Inn to review security footage and quickly learned that Natalee had left the bar with a young Dutch man. Local hotel workers and taxi drivers helped Beth identify Joran Sloot. Accompanied by Aruban police officers, Beth drove directly to the upscale Van der Sloot residence in the Montanja region. When confronted, the 17-year-old Joran appeared calm. He spun his very first lie, admitting that he had left the bar with Natalee, but claiming that he and the Kalpoe brothers had simply driven her back to the Holiday and Sunspree resort around 2 o'clock in the morning. He claimed she walked toward the entrance, and he never saw her again. The Kalpoe brothers initially backed up the story, but Aruban investigators quickly realized that the hotel's extensive security cameras showed no record of the gray Honda Civic dropping anyone off at that hour. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation grew into an international media storm, exposing massive fractures in the local law enforcement response. On June 5th, Aruban police detained 2 former hotel security guards, Mickey John and Abraham Jones, believing they might have intercepted the young girl. However, a lack of evidence forced their release. Then, on June 9th, the pressure became too immense to ignore. Aruban authorities arrested Joran van der Sloot, Deepak Kalpoe, and Satish Kalpoe, charging them with suspicion of murder and kidnapping.
With the suspects behind bars, the narrative began to warp. Under interrogation, Joran's alibi shifted like the Aruban sand. He dropped the hotel story entirely and claimed that they had driven Natalee to a remote area near the California lighthouse to look at the stars. Later, he altered the tale again, stating that he had left Natalee alone on a beach near the Marriott Hotel after she refused his advances, claiming he walked home barefoot while the Kalpoe brothers drove away. Every time the police presented evidence debunking his timeline, Joran would offer a new, more convoluted explanation. The investigation suffered an even heavier blow on June 23, when Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was detained for questioning. Suspicions arose that the elder van der Sloot was using his deep legal knowledge and political influence to coach the boys and manipulate the island's justice system. Paulus was released just 3 days later, and by September of 2005, due to the strict requirements of Dutch law which demand high thresholds of physical evidence for continued detention, all 3 primary suspects were released from custody without being formally indicted. While the legal battle stalled, the physical search for Natalee became one of the most exhaustive operations in Caribbean history. Thousands of local volunteers, alongside American tourists, combed every inch of the island. The specialized search organization Texas EquiSearch arrived with high-tech equipment, coordinating efforts to drain ponds, excavate landfills, and explore deep subterranean caves across Arikok National Park. The Dutch government deployed hundreds of Marines to systematically search the rugged coastlines and the brush around Hooberg Mountain. They even utilized Dutch Air Force F-16 fighter jets equipped with advanced ground-penetrating infrared radar to scan the island's terrain for disturbed Earth. Dive teams plunged into the deep waters of the Caribbean Sea, searching coral reefs and underwater drop-offs. But the island remained stubbornly silent. No clothing, no jewelry, and no physical traces of Natalee Holloway were ever found. The case grew agonizingly cold, and on January 12, 2012, an Alabama probate judge signed a decree officially declaring Natalee Holloway legally dead, closing a devastating chapter but leaving her family in an endless loop of grief. For 5 years, Joran van der Sloot traveled the world, taunting the media, participating in paid undercover interviews where he gave false details about selling Natalee into slavery or disposing of her body in a swamp, always retracting his words later. He believed he was completely untouchable. But predators rarely stop, and exactly 5 years to the day after Natalee disappeared, Joran's darkness crossed paths with another innocent soul. On May 30, 2010, Joran was in Lima, Peru, attending an international poker tournament. There, he met 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez, a bright business student and the daughter of a prominent Peruvian businessman. Security footage from the Atlantic City Casino in the affluent Miraflores district showed Joran and Stephanie gambling together before leaving in the early hours of the morning. At 5 o'clock in the morning, additional security cameras captured the pair entering room 309 of the Hotel TC, where Joran was staying. Just over 3 hours later, the cameras captured Joran leaving the room alone, carrying his bags and instructing hotel staff not to disturb his companion. It wasn't until days later that hotel workers entered room 309 and discovered a horrific scene. Stephanie Flores had been savagely beaten, her neck broken, and her body left face down on the floor. Joran had robbed her of her casino winnings and fled the country. An international manhunt was launched, and on June 3, 2010, Chilean police intercepted Joran in the coastal city of Vina del Mar, arresting him as he attempted to flee across the border into Argentina. He was swiftly extradited back to Peru to face justice for the brutal murder.
But the horror of Joran's actions in 2010 extended far beyond Peru, directly striking the Holloway family in a twisted plot hatched just months before Stephanie's murder. In March of 2010, Joran had reached out via email to John Q. Kelly, the longtime attorney for Beth Holloway. In this communication, Joran made an audacious and cruel offer. He claimed that for the sum of $250,000, he would reveal the exact location of Natalee's skeletal remains in Aruba and detail the precise method of her death. Desperate for closure, Beth Holloway worked with her attorney and contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who set up a sting operation. On May 10, 2010, a partial down payment of $25,000 was wired from a bank in Birmingham, Alabama, to Joran's personal bank account in the Netherlands. Joran met with Kelly in an American hotel room, where he gave a detailed description of an Aruban home foundation where he claimed his father had helped him bury Natalee. However, when investigators rushed to verify the site, they discovered the foundation had been poured long after Natalee vanished. Joran then sent a mocking email to the attorney, admitting that the information was completely fraudulent. He took the $25,000 of extortion money and immediately boarded a flight to Lima, Peru, using the funds to pay for his casino buy-ins and his stay at the Hotel Tesi, where he would murder Stephanie Flores just weeks later. On June 30, 2010, a federal grand jury in the Northern District of Alabama indicted Joran van der Sloot for federal wire fraud and extortion, setting a legal trap that would take over a decade to spring. In January of 2012, Joran pleaded guilty in a Peruvian court to the murder of Stephanie Flores. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison, initially housed in the notorious Castro prison before being transferred to Calapauca prison, a maximum security fortress situated over 14,000 feet high in the freezing, remote Andes Mountains near the Bolivian border. 4 years, it seemed Joran would serve his time in Peru, and the American extortion charges would simply languish. But Beth Holloway and American federal prosecutors, led by U.S. Attorney Prim Escalona, refused to let the clock run out. In early 2023, after intense diplomatic negotiations between the United States Department of Justice and the Peruvian executive government, an extraordinary agreement was reached. Peru consented to a temporary extradition, allowing Joran to be transferred to the United States to stand trial for the 2010 extortion and wire fraud charges before returning to finish his murder sentence. On June 8, 2023, Joran van der Sloot was walked onto an airplane by federal agents, flying directly into Birmingham, Alabama, less than 20 miles from the neighborhood where Natalee had grown up. He was booked into the Jefferson County Jail, facing the American legal system for the very first time. This brings us back to that monumental day, October 18, 2023, at the Hugo L. Black United States Courthouse in downtown Birmingham. Joran van der Sloot sat at the defense table, his youthful arrogance withered by years in harsh Peruvian prisons, facing U.S. District Judge Ana Manasco. To avoid a massive consecutive federal prison sentence that would destroy any hope of freedom after his eventual release from Peru, Joran signed a strict plea agreement. The primary clause of this contract demanded that he provide a complete, truthful confession detailing every aspect of the disappearance and death of Natalee Holloway, a confession subjected to rigorous polygraph testing and corroborated by existing evidence.
The courtroom fell into a stunned, heavy silence as the details of his official proffer statement were put into the record. Joran confessed that on the early morning of May 30, 2005, he had successfully isolated Natalee, driving her to a stretch of beach directly in front of the Aruba Marriott Resort. They sat on the sand, but when Joran attempted to make aggressive sexual advances, Natalee firmly rejected him. She stood up and attempted to walk away from him, heading toward the coastline. Infuriated by her rejection, Joran's temper exploded. He chased her down on the sand, grabbed her violently, and kicked her directly in the face, knocking her down. As she lay stunned and bleeding on the beach, Joran looked around and spotted a heavy, jagged concrete cinder block half buried in the sand. He picked it up and brought it down with immense force onto Natalee's head, crushing her skull and killing her instantly. With the teenage girl lying lifeless on the shore, Joran panicked. He didn't call for help or look for his father. Instead, he dragged her body down to the water's edge, stepped out into the dark waves of the Caribbean surf, and pushed her corpse out into the deep ocean currents, watching as the tides carried her away into the vast, unrecoverable sea. He then threw the cinder block into the deep water, walked home barefoot along the beach, and went to sleep, beginning 18 years of calculated deceit. The emotional climax of the courtroom arrived when Beth Holloway stood up to deliver her victim impact statement. Standing just feet from the man who had tormented her family, she spoke with a voice that shook with pain but remained unyielding. She told him that for 18 years, he had denied killing her daughter, choosing instead to torture her family with lies, but that today, his reign of terror was officially over. She called him an unrepentant monster, and told him that she hoped the sound of the prison doors slamming shut would remind him of his crimes for every remaining day of his life. Judge Anna Monasco did not hold back her disdain for the defendant. She characterized Joran's behavior as utterly heinous, noting that he had not only brutally murdered a young woman, but had weaponized her memory to extort the people who loved her most. She sentenced Joran to 20 years in federal prison for extortion and wire fraud. Under the terms of international law, Joran was immediately remanded into custody and flown back to Peru to serve out the remaining years of his 28-year sentence for the murder of Stephanie Flores. Once his time in Peru is completed, he will be returned to the United States to serve his 20-year federal sentence, ensuring that he will remain behind bars until he is an old man with little to no chance of ever walking free.
The legacy of Natalee Holloway's tragic story reaches far beyond the courtroom walls. Her disappearance fundamentally altered how missing persons investigations are handled internationally, exposing the critical need for immediate, standardized responses when American citizens vanish abroad. Out of her profound grief, Beth Holloway established the International Safe Travels Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to educating high school and college students on personal safety, situational awareness, and the hidden dangers of international travel. Natalee's name became a beacon for travel safety advocacy, ensuring that her memory lives on not just as a true crime statistic, but as a force for protection and awareness for future generations. It took nearly 2 decades, 2 distinct continents, and the tragic, preventable loss of another young woman's life for the web of lies to finally unravel. Joran van der Sloot will now spend the rest of his natural life behind a prison wall, but the Holloway family finally possesses the one thing they were ruthlessly denied for 18 long years: the absolute, undeniable truth. What are your thoughts on the final plea agreement? Do you believe 20 years for extortion is an adequate sentence when paired with his murder conviction in Peru? Or should the justice system have pushed for a separate trial? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Before you head out, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now to support Truth Finder Afees. Drop a like on this video if you want to support deep dive historical investigations. And click on the video appearing on your screen right now to explore our next deep dive into a case that defied explanation. Thank you for watching, keep looking for the facts, and I will see you in our next case.